And good morning, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and this is what I call my morning musings. I'm back to watching and listening to Dr. William Lane Craig in his attempt to explain away the language of imminence concerning the coming of the Son of Man that we find throughout the New Testament. I introduced this to you yesterday in the previous segment, pointing out that Dr. Craig seeks to mitigate the language by saying or by using a term of contextual ambiguity. And what he means by this, and as he states, I'm at the 1249 mark, and just a little bit prior to that, he said, we really don't know the context in which Jesus made some of his statements about the imminence of the parousia. And he gives Matthew 16, 27 and 28 and Mark 8, 38, 9, 1 as a classic example of us not knowing the context of these statements. Now, first of all, I'm rather staggered that Dr. Craig would make such a claim. Would he make such a claim, as I posed in the previous segment, when Dr. Craig is arguing against the atheist and the skeptic in regard to the resurrection of Jesus? Would he argue that when we come to John 19, 20, 21, that we really don't know the context of the description of the resurrection of Jesus? Would he argue that due to editorial liberty, that since there are varying descriptions given by Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John in regard to the resurrection, that this editorial license gives us the wrong impression purposely? Would he argue that the writers of the Gospels were so ignorant, they were such bad authors, that they would write on one page that Jesus said he was coming back very soon and gave that impression of an imminent return, and yet they did not themselves believe that he was coming back soon? What kind of comment does that make on the inspiration of the writers of the New Testament? Now, the question, therefore, is, do we have contextual ambiguity in regard to, for instance, Matthew 16, 27 and 28, in which Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according as his work shall be. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, first of all, what we can know for certain is that Jesus was speaking to people living 2,000 years ago. He said, there are some standing here. He did not say there are some people who will be alive at the time of the coming of the Son of Man, whenever that might be. There are some standing here. That quantifies and qualifies the context, and it's not ambiguous because he was speaking to living, breathing human beings. Furthermore, let's see how ambiguous the context really is. We know that Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, so we know where he was. We know that he had been discussing, and he posed to his disciples, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Son of Man as to his identity, Son of Man as to his coming. We know that Jesus, responding to Peter's assertion that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, that he was going to establish his church, his kingdom. Verse 18 and following. We know that Jesus said he was going to die. Now remember, this is all in the same identical venue. It's all in the same context. The Son of Man will go up to Jerusalem, there be crucified, but raised the third day. And he said to his disciples, they were going to have to be suffering with him. And then he made the promise of his coming in vindication of his suffering and their suffering. What is ambiguous about this context? We know the place. We know the context of the discussion. We know the audience. Exactly what is ambiguous. Now, in our next installment, we will examine how Dr. Craig seeks to pit Matthew 16:27-28 against Mark 8:38 and 9:1. It is a futile attempt to try to make Matthew 16:27 and 28 set against Mark 9:1. Actually, they corroborate, they enforce, they empower one another, thus demonstrating that Dr. William Lane Craig's attempt to set forth what he calls contextual ambiguity in his attempts to negate the time statements of Scripture about the first century coming of the Son of Man are vain, they're misguided, and they're false. Hey, don't forget, if you'll order my book, I have a tremendous discussion of the objective nature of the time statements of Scripture. In my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, the Wedding of the King of Kings. Go to my website, www.eschatology.org, BibleProphecy.com. Order the book, mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. That'll save you $5, okay? Thanks again for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We have more as we examine Dr. William Lane Craig's objections to the time statements of Scripture, and you don't want to miss it. So we'll see you on the flip side.